Security forces in Brussels are on alert this morning after police stopped a suspect from carrying out a major terror attack. Officials say the explosion at the city's central train station last night could have been much worse. The attacker set off a small blast. The suitcase, packed with nails and gas canisters, exploded twice but failed to fully detonate. The 36-year-old attacker shouted "Allahu Akbar" before officers shot and killed him. No one else was hurt.
A Moroccan citizen living in a Brussels borough set off his bomb on a crowded station concourse below ground at 8:44 p.m. local time Tuesday. Walking up to a crowd of passengers, he grabbed a suitcase while shouting "Allahu Akbar" and caused a partial explosion.
The moment a device is detonated inside Brussels Central train station. Soldiers are on the scene at the station in the centre of the Belgian capital. Officials say they shot a man suspected of being a would-be suicide bomber. He was reportedly wearing a bomb belt and carrying a rucksack. The station and the nearby Grand Place were evacuated.
Quand moi je suis redescendu pour rejoindre le quai,
I went down to the platforms, he says. There was a man yelling and shouting about jihadists. Then he shouted "Allahu Akbar" and he detonated the small suitcase he had with
la
him.
petite valise qu'il avait à côté de lui. Où là donc les gens ont pris la fuite, ils sont partis.
People were running. I went down to the platforms and raised the alarm to evacuate the station.
Finnish police say they have foiled a terrorist attack targeting a church in Helsinki. The Tempeliokio Church, a popular tourist attraction in the heart of the city, built directly into a piece of stone, is less than a kilometre from the Finnish parliament and supposedly was a planned target for terrorists. The Finnish Security Intelligence Service has made an assessment that the threat of terrorism has increased. A 2015 assessment indicated a high risk of a single terror attack, and we have now elevated the general threat level. This means that we are now very well prepared. Helsinki police sent several units to patrol near the so-called Rock Church to try to apprehend a suspect in the area, although it remains unclear whether any arrests were made.
A Russian fighter jet flying within just a few feet of a U.S. reconnaissance plane today, and it comes after the U.S. shot down a Syrian plane. Syria, of course, supported by Russia.
The jets were flying high over the Baltic Sea. A U.S. Air Force reconnaissance plane suddenly intercepted by a Russian fighter jet approaching from behind, coming just 5 feet from the wingtip of the U.S. jet, an encounter the Americans called unsafe.
It came in at such a high rate of speed and was seemingly out of control that it really concerned the U.S. Aircraft pilots.
Russian aircraft have buzzed and intercepted not only U.S. aircraft, but U.S. warships in the last year. Last summer, during a training exercise in the Baltics with the U.S. Air Force, our fighter jet, which flew wingtip to wingtip safely with U.S. jets, was warned by nearby Russian pilots we were getting too close to their border.
We're flying over Estonia now, but just over to the east, to the right, is Russia.
The Americans said the Russians were just being provocative and continued the exercise.
There we go, roll in left.
While the U.S. intercepts Russian planes as well, it has been within the safety norms.
The White House says that U.S. sanctions on Russia will remain in place until Moscow, quote, withdraws from eastern Ukraine. White House spokesman Sean Spicer made the comments after the U.S. imposed fresh sanctions on dozens of Russian individuals and organizations over what it called Moscow's actions in Ukraine. The measure has provoked criticism from Russia, with the country's top diplomat, Sergei Lavrov, calling it regrettable and part of Washington's, quote, Russophobe obsession.
I can only express my regret about the Russophobe obsession of our U.S. colleagues, which breaks odds.
A U.S. jet battling Islamic State shooting down an Iranian-made drone in Syria on Tuesday, the latest in a series of incidents stoking tensions in the war-torn country. The Pentagon said the pro-government drone, quote, displayed hostile intent and advanced on coalition forces near Syria's border with Iraq. It's the second time this month U.S.-led forces have shot down an Iranian drone, and it comes days after the U.S. downed a Syrian government plane for the first time, sparking outrage from Russia and Iran as they back Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in the 6-year-old war. The threat of a direct U.S.-Russia confrontation rising after Moscow threatened to target U.S. planes flying west of the Euphrates River. The U.S. on Tuesday warning it would not, quote, tolerate any hostile intent and action of pro-regime forces.
According to U.S. officials, Iran has established a drone airfield inside Syria not far from a U.S. military base. The area could be the source of drones that have recently threatened U.S. troops. America has established a 55-mile deconfliction zone around the base and warned that any craft entering it may be intercepted.
Where the Iranian president says Iran's missile strikes on Daesh positions in Syria were absolutely necessary and appropriate, stressing that any action by terrorist groups will receive a decisive response.
If a small group sends in operatives and impudently tries to prove itself to some of our enemies in the region and around the world by attempting to undermine the greatness of the Islamic Republic of Iran, it definitely receives a response, a most decisive response.
Rouhani added that if Iran was attacked again, the response would be more crushing.
That's right. The Pentagon also announced today that coalition forces killed Turki al-Benali, the self-proclaimed Grand Mufti or chief cleric of ISIS, in an airstrike May 31st in Mayadeen, Syria, not far from Raqqa. Al-Benali had a central role in recruiting foreign terrorist fighters, according to the Pentagon. He provided propaganda to incite murder and was a close confidant of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS. He was also on the U.S. Treasury's sanctions list and faced UN sanctions as well. This is being considered a pretty big hit by the U.S. coalition.
U.S. military advisors in Afghanistan are finding themselves increasingly under fire from the very people they've been training. In 2 recent incidents alone, 3 U.S. soldiers were killed and 7 more injured.
What we can safely say is that from now on, after this latest incident, American troops will be looking at their Afghan allies with just that little bit more suspicion.
Green on blue attacks are when Afghan forces, either infiltrators or defectors, purposefully fire on coalition troops. It's been a Taliban tactic for years.
This is an achievement for the Mujahideen, who have managed to create mistrust among the enemy forces.
Such attacks peaked during Obama's troop surge. It got so bad that they rewrote the book on security.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
First, American soldiers training Afghans were assigned bodyguards. Then, all coalition troops were ordered to have their weapons loaded at all times. Afghan recruits were made to go through an 8-step vetting process, while an Inquisition-like body purged anyone it deemed radical. Yet, here we are.
There's 7 U.S. Army soldiers that have been wounded in northern Afghanistan. Now, this comes a week after 3 U.S. Army soldiers were killed in a similar incident.
Saudi Arabia's king has appointed his son, Mohammed bin Salman, as crown prince, replacing his nephew, Mohammed bin Nayef, as first in line to the throne. King Salman's decree also means 31-year-old Prince Mohammed bin Salman will become deputy prime minister while continuing as defense minister. He's been responsible for organizing Riyadh's war with Yemen and dictating the country's energy policy. 57-year-old Mohammed bin Nayef has pledged allegiance to the new crown prince. Insiders say the 31-year-old's promotion confirms him as next ruler of the kingdom.
The first flights from Israel to Saudi Arabia might be beginning soon, following United States President Donald Trump's historic flight on Air Force One from Riyadh to Ben Gurion Airport. The United States, the Palestinian Authority, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan have reportedly been in secret negotiations to run flights from Israel to Saudi Arabia. But don't expect to see many Israelis on these flights just yet. They'll only be for Palestinians to make pilgrimages to the Saudi holy sites of Mecca and Medina, and they'll be making a stop in Amman, Jordan, as Saudi Arabia still does not officially recognize Israel. A senior Israeli source is telling Ynet that the talks are already in advanced stages, and the flights will be run by a company that is neither Israeli nor Saudi.
The Israeli Prime Minister has taken to Twitter to attack Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, and he's claiming that the Fatah leader is poisoning the minds of Palestinian youth. In a late-night series of tweets on Monday, Netanyahu accused Abbas of lying to the world about his attitude toward terrorism. Last week, Netanyahu pointed out that the Palestinian Authority named a public square after the terrorist who planned the 1974 Ma'alot massacre. The terror attack in northern Israel resulted in the deaths of 22 children. Additionally, Netanyahu says that after Friday's Jerusalem terror attack, Abbas's Fatah movement decorated the house of one of the killers with flags. Although the Palestinian Authority has not claimed responsibility for the Friday attacks, it has accused Israel of war crimes for the deaths of the terrorists. The Prime Minister's tweet storm came hours after U.S. President Donald Trump's peace envoy Jason Greenblatt arrived in Israel. Greenblatt and Trump's senior advisor Jared Kushner will be meeting with Netanyahu and other high-level Israeli and Palestinian officials this week.
The Trump administration is considering banning U.S. citizens from traveling to North Korea after the death of Otto Warmbier.
The tour group that Otto Warmbier used to get into North Korea says it will no longer be taking Americans into the country. Young Pioneer Tours told USA Today the devastating loss of Otto Warmbier's life has led us to reconsider our position on accepting American tourists. They went on to say that the risk for Americans in North Korea is now too high. They will no longer be organizing tours for U.S. citizens to North Korea. Warmbier returned to the United States on June 13th in a coma after spending over a year at a detention center. He died on Monday. Senate Armed Services Committee Chairman John McCain says Warmbier was murdered by the Kim Jong-un regime. In the final year of his life, he lived the nightmare in which the North Korean people have been trapped for 70 years. Forced labor, mass starvation, systematic cruelty, torture, and murder. U.S. doctors have doubted Pyongyang's diagnosis that Warmbier suffered from a case of botulism and then went into a coma after taking a sleeping pill. They say he suffered extreme brain damage. The Washington Post says his death could lead Congress or the Trump administration to restrict or ban Americans from traveling to North Korea.
Two of the president's tweets today targeted North Korea, accusing it of brutality in the death of Otto Warmbier. Next week, South Korea's new president will travel to the White House for talks on de-escalating the North's nuclear threat.
And there's a lot to discuss at the White House next week, including President Moon's proposal for a step-by-step process that includes dialogue that ultimately leads to a dismantling of North Korea's nuclear weapons program.
Why would Kim Jong-un ever agree to freeze his nuclear weapons program? What are you going to give him?
Kim Jong-un currently has a blind faith that his nuclear and missile programs will protect him and his regime, and so we must show and teach North Korea that this belief is incorrect. If North Korea gives up its nuclear program and missile programs and wants to start a dialogue, then I believe we can send a message that we will not threaten Kim Jong-un's regime, and we can even provide assistance to them. And that is why I fully agree with President Trump that we need stronger sanctions and pressure on North Korea to the level that we have never reached before. Maximum pressure.
Ever since 2001, Angelina Jolie has been an ambassador for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. The actress kicked off a humanitarian trip to Africa on Tuesday by visiting 20 young refugee girls who are living away from their parents in the Heshima, Kenya safe house. According to an article posted on the UNHCR's website, the girls Jolie met with have all fled extreme violence or persecution in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, South Sudan, Somalia, Burundi, and Rwanda. Almost all have suffered sexual and gender-based violence. Many have given birth or are pregnant after being raped. During her visit, Jolie gave a speech to mark World Refugee Day, stating, "On World Refugee Day, my only ask is that people consider the pain and suffering of young girls like these."
A van driver has been killed after migrants dragged several huge tree trunks onto a motorway near the French port of Calais. His Polish-registered van burst into flames when it crashed into a truck that had braked suddenly to avoid the roadblock. 9 Eritrean migrants were arrested after French authorities found them hiding in one of the trucks halted by the tree trunks. Many migrants congregate on motorways or along the rail line that goes through the Channel Tunnel. They regularly drag objects onto the road, forcing vehicles to stop. They often slip into the cargo section and hide in trucks bound for Britain.
11 men have gone on trial in Hungary over the deaths of 71 migrants left to suffocate in the back of a refrigerated lorry abandoned by the side of an Austrian motorway. The detainees are all charged with human trafficking and torture and have been in custody for 2 years. 4 of them, including a 30-year-old Afghan man thought to be the ringleader of the gang and a 26-year-old Bulgarian truck driver, stand accused of murder with particular cruelty. The group are thought to have been part of a larger network believed to have smuggled over 1,000 people into Germany and Austria at the height of Europe's migrant crisis in 2015.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions has announced a program intended to help cities push back against violent crime. The National Public Safety Partnership, or PSP for short, is meant to help local law enforcement deal with gun violence, gangs, and drug trafficking, according to its website. Details are vague right now, but the program seems to focus on training and technical assistance, as well as federal oversight to make sure local jurisdictions are equipped with what they need to address violent crime. What we do know is that PSP is built off of an Obama-era program, the Violence Reduction Network, or VRN. That program was a cooperative, data-driven, hands-on approach with the goal of addressing violent crime. Sessions announced 12 cities were selected for the program. The Department of Justice plans to add more cities to the program later this year.
A day after Brexit negotiations officially began, Britain's finance minister says his priority will be to avoid what he calls dangerous cliff edges. He told a London audience that what's needed first is a comprehensive trade agreement, and secondly, transitional arrangements.
When the British people voted last June, they did not vote to become poorer or less secure. They did vote to leave the EU, and we will leave the EU. But it must be done in a way that works for Britain, in a way that prioritises British jobs and underpins Britain's prosperity.
Police in Buenos Aires, Argentina have uncovered a treasure trove of Nazi artifacts, including Hitler's own magnifying glass. In a sleepy suburb just north of Buenos Aires, police have found a massive collection of Nazi artifacts. From a bust of Adolf Hitler to what may be the Nazi leader's own magnifying glass, the collection is both strange and frightening. Argentina was a refuge for high-ranking Nazi criminals after World War II, with many of them being transported to safety through Vatican-fostered rat lines from Europe to Latin America. In 1960, the Israeli Mossad captured Nazi criminal Adolf Eichmann near his home in Buenos Aires and transported him back to Israel for trial. Authorities believe that this collection may have belonged to a very high-ranking Nazi official. The current owner of the artifacts is not under arrest, but he is being investigated by a federal judge.
As early as next week, you won't need to pick a gender to apply for a Washington, D.C. driver's license. The state following in Oregon's footsteps, we actually told you about that last week, and will soon include a not specified option on DMV applications. This means instead of an M or an F on a state-issued ID, there would be an option for an X.
The U.S. National Hurricane Center, or NHC, said Tuesday Tropical Storm Brett has degenerated into a tropical wave. The wave is expected to continue moving westward across the Caribbean, where strong southerly shear prevails. The NHC added regeneration of the system is not anticipated. With maximum sustained winds of 40 miles per hour, Brett was located about 115 miles east of Curacao.
A massive and dangerous storm is bearing down on the Gulf Coast. Millions of Americans are at risk from drenching rains and damaging winds.
Tropical Storm Cindy is her name. It's the first major storm of the season to take direct aim at the continental United States.
The storm's reach stretches across a 500-mile area of the Gulf Coast from Texas to Florida. Right now, sustained winds are up to 60 miles an hour.
Parts of Mississippi and Louisiana are expecting up to a foot of rain. New Orleans could see 6 to 10 inches.
The rain from Tropical Storm Cindy is already making an impact on the Gulf Coast, bringing whipping winds, whitecaps, and storm surge. Roads in several states are impassable. As far east as Gwinnett County, Georgia, the effects from Cindy have caused flash flooding. First responders rescued almost 30 people trapped due to rising water.
We all try to get in the cars and drive out. Didn't happen.
Here in New Orleans, preparations began days before the storm's arrival. Trucks delivered hundreds of sandbags to low-lying towns threatened by severe flooding.
This is a major rain event.
Ken Graham is a meteorologist with the National Weather Service. He says it is critical that people focus on areas beyond the storm's projected cone. We as Americans get so caught up in that cone, right? When the National Weather Service puts it out, we say, oh, well, that's where it's going. And outside of that, we must be good.
We talk to the public. We tell them, be ready. The impacts are well outside that cone. Rain, surge, all the different factors for the tropical system could be well outside that cone.
Mitch Landrieu is the New Orleans mayor.
Listen, we've been through this many times before. I don't want anybody to panic. There's no reason to do that. But this is going to be a serious event.
Unrelenting heat bears down on Phoenix as the temperature shoots towards a record-breaking 120. Fire crews are rushing to handle a surge in heat emergencies. When it's over 110, your body cannot cool itself down, setting up the potential for deadly heat stroke. Director of Emergency Management, Lisa Jones.
Your house stays hot, buildings stay hot, the sidewalk stays hot, so there's no reprieve, basically.
The city opened 47 cooling centers across the valley, and about 50 flights had to be canceled at Sky Harbor Airport because it may be too hot to fly.
For the last few days, it's been very hot. I've never seen it this hot before.
Osmond Sharif has spent the last 2 days loading bags in triple-digit heat. He's hydrating and taking breaks, but says you can't escape this weather.
On the concrete, it's 168 degrees.
So you're getting 118 from above,
yes,
and 168 from below.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you feel like you're in an oven?
Yes, I do.
The heat intensified a dust storm leading to this accident on Interstate 10 on the Arizona-New Mexico border, killing 6. Across the Southwest, it's a scorcher. Death Valley, California hit 126. Palm Springs, 120. In Tucson, it's 115. 113 in Vegas.
The European heat wave shows no signs of abating as temperatures continue to soar across the continent. The time may be right for dancing in the street as the heat climbs above 30 degrees, but the summer sun is not for everyone. Some are struggling to cope with the unnaturally high temperatures as they seek refuge from the heat. There have also been a number of reported drownings across the continent as revelers flock to the nearest body of water to cool off. The World Meteorological Organization has said that temperature records are being broken across Europe and that only 2016 saw higher global temperatures.
Federal health officials are saying mosquitoes that can spread Zika, dengue, and chikungunya viruses are in more counties in the southern United States than previously thought. After a Zika outbreak in Florida last summer, researchers from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention expanded mosquito collection measures across the South. The new study revealed a 21% increase in the number of counties with Zika-carrying mosquitoes. There was also a 10% increase in counties with dengue-spreading mosquitoes.